Welcome to the Jennifer Gray Show, a place that you can get unstuck, make shift happen, and not take life so seriously.
That's awesome.
Yes.
That's a great tag.
Welcome, Christopher DeSanti. I'm so excited to have you. Let me tell you guys a little bit about Chris. He is an international transformational trainer, an educator of higher knowledge. In 2008, he began facilitating his own satsang style classes and holds private classes still each week. Chris is currently the director of facilities training for Gratitude Training, where he brings his wisdom and passion for his classes with commitment and love for people of all walks of life. So thank you, my teacher, for being here today. And this is really amazing for me because you have been one of my greatest teachers. So
Thank you. It's great to be here. Thank you for
happy to share you with everybody. We have so many cameras going here. It's just, for me, this is like full expression of fun.
Awesome.
I hope you're okay with it.
Oh, I love it. Thank you for having me.
Camera one,
Yeah.
camera two, camera three. Yes. And so today we're here to talk about all sorts of stuff, I'm sure. But first and foremost, we're going to discuss Chris's awesome new book, Urban Mystic, Ancient Wisdom from a Modern Day Seeker. So before we really dive into this book, I just want to rewind a little bit and go kind of through the ages of your life, of your awakening, of your becoming. And we have very similar roots, right? Like Jersey, Brooklyn, which is why probably I connected with you so well when I first met you. So tell me what it was like just growing up in Jersey, like your fam, and what year were you born?
I was born 79.
Okay, cool.
79, yeah.
Yeah, and so the 80s, right?
Yeah.
So that's your first decade. Tell me about
Yeah.
Chris in the 80s.
Yeah. It's funny. I talk to my wife all the time about how great the 80s were, I, just because that was the era that I grew up in, and in New Jersey as a kid, I grew up with two brothers. I had an older brother, a younger brother. My older brother's like 2 years older. My younger brother's about 13 months. We were really close in age. We grew up in a place called North Plainfield. It was on the outside of Plainfield. Was a pretty big, medium-sized city, I would say, but big in the early 1900s. My father, my family came into Newark. My father grew up in Hillside, New Jersey, and Plainfield was the place back then.
Right.
And so I grew up in North Plainfield till about 8, and then I moved to the town over, Watchung. And, growing up, we were super into sports. It's back when kids still played outside. I drive around, I'm like, there's no kids anywhere.
Yeah.
We were in the woods all the time, and sports was huge. And, really, as a kid, very much I say this in the book, too, like a lot of wonder, joy, excitement.
Yes.
And then it was also not the best neighborhood, so I was met with the harsher realities of the world early too. So there's this dichotomy
like getting
of
your ass kicked.
Yeah, bullied
stuff.
Oh my gosh, all the time. I always wanted to hang out with the older kids. I used to. My mom. There was a joke I'd always say. I just want to be older than my brother for one day. One day, and I couldn't wait to be 17. That was like the age. I don't know.
Yeah, mine was 16. I was like, I just want to be 16.
I was like, I can't. I thought when you're 17, you're like an adult and you know everything. And,
I have a 17-year-old. That's not the truth.
Clearly. So that's how it started, and luckily we moved when I was 8 because my mother was like, if my kids grow up here and they stay here, they're gonna end up not in good shape.
Right.
So that's how it started.
Move them on out.
Yeah. So we moved to the town over.
Okay, so then the 90s. Now this is like your teenage years, right? And so what was that like for you?
Well, in the early 90s, I got really clear about, in terms of sports, we played football, baseball, basketball. And then around I think around 6th grade or so, I got really clear. I was like, basketball is the thing for me,
right.
And basketball is very big in New Jersey, New York, and California were big basketball states. So I was in the gym day in, day out, hours. I would play all night with my friends, and that sports was it.
Yeah.
That's how we connected. And then basketball became this obsession for me. My brothers were great at it too. We would battle in our backyard, friends, and just have a lot of fun. And then Then I took it real even to like another level of seriousness, and I write about this in the book, and I really quickly got that there were eyes on me and how good I was, and then by the time I was going into high school, they were already wanting me to play on the varsity, when I was a freshman.
Right.
And I tried out for it, and it was like, and then I got accepted. I became one of the starting guards with my older brother. Then I became the leading scorer, and then it was like I was starting to get a lot of notoriety
Right,
and people
and
attention. Like, who is this kid? He's
Right.
14, and then I got invited to play at one of the top school, the all-star team in New Jersey, and started getting recruited. And so the middle '90s was all about how good I was nationwide.
Wow.
Like, I was getting recruited by a lot of Division I schools, and I was playing with guys that were playing for Notre Dame and Davidson. They would come pick me up from school.
Wow.
And that was it for me.
Yeah.
Like, I was like, I hit it,
Yes.
And then
And were you good in school? So like it was easy for you to just kind of keep up?
I was good enough. Like, I was
Yeah,
a B plus student. I always got a good enough grade, so nobody would mess with me too much about the sports stuff.
Yeah.
And they just let me play. So that
Yes.
was like my philosophy,
Right.
And then it all fell apart.
How perfect.
I know. I was like, thank God, it all fell apart really fast.
Yeah. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
How life just,
Totally.
right?
Totally. Yeah.
And do you think, just side note here, I was having this conversation with my last guest, Janet, who is a really interesting clairvoyant, clairaudient, also from New York. And, we're talking about free will and destiny, right? And those moments where things fall apart, and actually they're just falling back together. And in the moment, you just can't see it and you think it's all falling apart. But was there like when it was falling apart, even at that young age, was there a piece of you that was present to, well, maybe this is happening for a bigger reason?
Yeah.
Or were you not even like
there
tuned
was
into that?
there was because it was interesting because towards the end of my basketball, like, I was still played, but I started to read books on how to be like the inner athlete, and
Right.
I was reading books I remember this one book by, I think it was like on the Tao and the flow of an athlete, and so I started to dabble in that, which was really in some ways trying to save me in basketball, because I started to in the pressure and all this
it's
stuff.
a lot of attention
Yeah.
on you.
And then when it fell apart, it was like I was already being prepped, but I couldn't really see it, and it was
Yeah.
just, I was a kid, and my parents split up, and I'm like,
Yes.
life is thinking it's gonna last forever,
Yeah.
But because of that intense suffering, it really suffering can be grace, or it could be like we're being led. It can be this trial by fire, if you will. And I feel like I was being led, and it really started to lead me into fascinating places really quickly.
Right. So there you are. Was it like 16 years old?
Yeah.
Okay,
about
so you're 16, and now your life takes this new direction.
Totally.
Tell me about that.
Well, it's so funny. I was bringing in a book on it was like shamanic work to a teacher. So
16.
Yeah. Well, the teacher asked in class, was talking about something. I was like, have you ever heard of this author? And the teacher looked at me and said, how do you know who that is? I'm like,
Yeah.
the book's at my house.
How is the book at your house?
Because my cousin he was into this, my older cousin. And he was getting us into it. So we would just kind of follow his lead. And
Yeah.
so he was really a spark or catalyst.
Yes.
And the book was about a young kid raised by like a shaman, like that taught him the ways of like the spirit world and all this. And I'm like bringing this in for a teacher.
Right.
And I just remember this one moment. I was like, holy cow, I don't think my life's ever going to be the same. It was like that.
Yeah.
And then I just was obsessed.
I was about to say, then the next obsession
then
began.
it literally went
Yeah.
like basketball to spirituality, just went shoo. And it was funny at the time. People were like, "I hear you like walk in the woods barefoot," and
Oh,
like,
you became that kid?
That kid, like what? And they were like, "What happened to basketball?" And I just was burnt out, and
Yeah.
I just started. I would cut class to go like read books and stuff.
Wow.
The teachers used to like throw chalk at me in high school. In like calculus class, I would be under the table reading, and they like throw chalk and be like, "Pay attention." And I'm like,
Yeah,
I don't think I need to know any of this."
Yeah, you're like, this algebra stuff is not competing with the shaman
Yeah,
stuff.
this stuff's
Sorry.
better. This
Yeah.
stuff's better.
Wow.
And then I was in my best friend's brother's room, just walking in his room, and I'm like, I have this thing where I check people's bookshelves out. Like I love looking at their bookshelves to see what they read.
Who
like
they are, yeah,
like,
right
you could
there.
tell, like, ooh, do we connect? And he had this book by Ram Dass, Be Here Now.
Yes.
I opened the book and I remember going, holy cow, what is this? I closed the book. I wrote the name down.
Yep.
I ordered it Barnes & Noble because you didn't really have the internet.
Yes.
And I was like, ordered it, and that opened me up to a whole nother world.
Yes.
And
You quoted something by Ram Dass in this book. What do you remember what you said?
a few things.
Yeah. It's earlier in the
Yeah,
beginning.
I talk about what he talks in one of his books about the women walking in Africa with the
water.
Actually it was like a baskets they carry on their head.
Yes, yes.
And they can talk and live life, but it's almost like they just know the baskets on their head. So I use that as an analogy. He uses it in his book.
That's something else though, because it was something earlier.
Yeah.
But anyway, it's
I have a
okay.
couple quotes in there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And do you know what's so funny? Like I segued in about Oprah Book Club, like the Celestine Prophecy, the Seed of the Soul. Like that's where my intersection came into this work. So it must have been when I was about the early 30s. And so what year was that? I don't know. I'm confused right now. The 90s?
Yeah,
the 2000s?
Yeah.
Yeah, like 2000. So this is where I start awakening and reading all this stuff. And then I just stay kind of mainstream with Deepak and Wayne Dyer and all these guys. And then I write my own version of, this stuff and whatnot. But I never, until now, went back. It's like even Michael Singer is still in that string of mainstream.
Yeah.
Right. And so, I had a conversation with Chris the other night. We went out to dinner and I was telling him all about Michael Singer because he's been such a great influence on me in my next book. And he said, if you go in the beginning of Michael Singer's book, he's talking about, say the name.
Ramana Maharshi.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I can't say it yet. I'll get there. So, there's this amazing book, and he's like, you've got to read this book. And I order it, and now it's like, oh, this is where they're all coming from, right?
Yeah.
But I couldn't these other books, I couldn't understand it until now. So I'm glad that I'm going back now with the wisdom that I have and have learned from the gratitude trainings and from all the books that I've read. And now I can actually understand I am that. This book is called I Am That. And I'm actually reading it simultaneously with your book right now, which is kind of fun because in a way yours is a little bit more layman and interpretive to me that I can really understand it here, and I'm sort of understanding it here. But it's fascinating to me that at 16, 17, you're going to the source, that you're going to this deep, deep wisdom. And like, how did you even understand that?
It wasn't really easy, actually. It was really a tough time because I didn't have anybody to go and ask either.
Right.
So what I would do is I would take these names I would hear of and see quotes by and be like, okay, I always thought, well, why, let me just go to the source.
Yeah.
So if everybody's going to and talking about these people and writing things in their own words, why don't I go and learn from them?
The main guy.
The main guy. So it wasn't so easy. I would read them. There would be so many times I'd be like, what are they talking about? I mean, I got what they were pointing at, but how do I experience that?
Yes.
And it was really challenging.
Yes.
And I think it was really needed too, because I think for me, as my life as a trainer now, when I did the gratitude trainings and when they invited me to be a trainer, I had heard all these conversations before.
Right.
But I thought that they were putting in a really practical way for people. So for me, I was already like, well, I've been like wrestling this for like 15, 20 years.
Right. Like,
and it's
I know
great.
this.
It's great that they put it in such a clear place.
Yes.
But my wrestling with it got me really clear. Like stacks of books and I always felt like I could tell if somebody was really clear. Like, I don't want to say like enlightened, but it was almost like you could tell if they were or not just by the way that they spoke. And I wasn't really attracted to like the famous. I was more attracted to like the wisdom, and if I felt like I could discern if they were really talking from a
Right.
genuine place or not, or they were more about like the fame or the I just wanted notoriety as a teacher.
Yes,
It was like I could
right.
discern,
Yeah.
and I loved some of these teachers because they didn't really care about any of that.
Yes.
And then
Right.
my first trip to India, I heard one of the translators for that book that I was telling you about was alive. So I'm like,
Going
oh
to
my,
him.
I'm like, if he's still alive and he could speak English and Marathi, and he was the translator, that's like the bridge to both these worlds that I might not have a chance to ever be
Yeah,
around
because the
again.
way that it's written and then translated, there's a
Totally.
loss in translation. But if somebody knows both languages really well,
Yeah. Well,
so
here's
you found him.
I did, and the thing that was fascinating for me,
And how old are you when you do this?
22. Well, the first time I went to India,
What
oh,
was
man.
it like dating Chris? Like, what
Well,
were
that's a
these
whole other
chicks
story.
like? What?
But I kind of I had a double life,
Yes,
so I was like
yes,
this
you're
like
like normal,
social
social.
party guy, but then I was also behind closed doors like reading and meditating and doing all this stuff. When I went to India the first time, they sent me home because I didn't have the right visa.
Oh
So I flew
God.
all the way to India and flew back, I swear. It was like the biggest joke when I got there the second time. Because like, here's this kid. I just flew to this guy's house to go to satsang. I just showed up at the front door. I was like, I heard he gives talks. He's still alive. I'm going.
Yes.
That was it. My dad thought I was crazy. People
I'm
were like,
sure.
why are
Where are
well,
you
you're going to
going?
India? What the?
Oh my gosh.
But that's
you did.
yeah.
And so you get there and you're in this like guy's house, and just give us, paint the picture.
Well, it was so it was liberating, and then it was also, I mean, I could only listen to where I was at the time. So I remember when I got to India, I was there for a few weeks the first time, and I went into like a dark space because here I am in satsang and listening to the teacher, and then everybody's talking about the teaching. People are arguing, disagreeing, like outside of it. So here I'm this like young kid, and I'm getting swayed by all these people's opinions, and it's like this, it's like that, and then I'm like confused and wait.
Right.
And it was a really defining moment for me because like it's like you made it to
Yeah.
and then you're like,
This ain't
wait,
it.
is this it? Do I know? Wait, oh my gosh, I still feel the same. Like, what do I do? And it was really challenging. And you know what in the book I was telling you about, one of those teachers said something really profound that I never forgot, and I write about it in Urban Mystic a little bit, is that earnestness is the key.
Yeah.
That if you're earnest, you find the answer.
Find it.
And it was a lot more seeking, a lot more work, if you will.
Yeah.
And that was my early 20s.
And so meditation for you at that age, right? You were meditating, doing the internal deep dive in. And what was the meditation practice that you followed at that time?
Well, of course, I chose like not a simple one where you just just follow your breath and relax, like, okay, I've done that.
Yeah.
This was more of a meditation on who am I and who's the seeker and who's the meditator.
Yes.
So I would go in and try to find the witness. But then the mind's like, is this the witness? I don't know.
Right.
And then you're like, well, what exactly? So the teachers would say something like, as the witness, the seer of consciousness or of life.
Yep.
Then the mind's really clever because then I'm like, where is that? Am I that? What is this mind? Is it like? And it could be a really far out dance.
Yes.
So my practice then was going inward, and I would hold on to like the beingness, the I amness, the witness. And then the mind come in, and then I'd bring it back to that. I've done a lot of like mantra stuff and all of that, but this was like meditating on the meditator.
Yes.
And that's a distinction that a lot of people in meditation, I don't know that they necessarily, because I can bring my attention back to my nose and I can keep doing that, but I might never turn the attention onto the one that even witnesses the nose or the thoughts.
Yep.
So that's what I was playing around with a lot then.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
it's funny because I don't think I've practiced that during meditation. I practice that in life. Like I'm always like, now who's watching that? Like, especially when something comes up, upsetting, right? So then I watch the part of me that's upset, and then the other part of me is like, so what are you going to do with that? And so I don't even know if that is even the audience or the witness, but it probably is because it's the wise one.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
So for me, something interesting happened was sometimes I think to a fault, my mind can be very clever.
Yeah.
Especially when I've read a lot and all this. So I could find myself being like a trickster a little bit of the mind.
Yeah.
So that whole lineage is really called Advaita Vedanta from India, like the non-duality teachings from certain teachers.
Okay.
It's like a Zen of Buddhism type thing.
Okay.
When I discovered A Course in Miracles, that was like the game changer.
Got it.
Because that was a different... In India, a lot of people don't know this, but they talk about two distinct paths.
Okay.
You probably know it, of bhakti, devotion,
Yes.
or jnana or jnana, they call it, of knowledge. And there are a lot of people, like the devotees would be devoted to God, surrender to a higher power. The path of knowledge, jnana or gyan, is about turning the awareness inward on who am I, and it's more of like an intellectual dance of and coming to I'm the seer and I'm not the mind, like you're talking about Michael Singer's book. And what I found, and they used to say this, but it really became my experience, is eventually in the end the paths merge.
Oh.
So the ones who are devoted to God discover who they really are.
Right.
And the ones who look inward to discover who they really are find God.
Oh, wow.
It was like this, and it happened for me in terms of like A Course in Miracles, because that was all about devotion.
Yes.
And then they merged. Like when I would, like stuff would come up, if you're driving, I'd go like, who am I? I'm still pissed off.
Yeah.
But then I would be like, the Course had a different approach. So they would work really well. It was almost like when one didn't work, the other did for me. That was really how I started to dance
I'm
with it.
definitely on this path of knowledge for sure, right? Not devotion. And it was so cool the other day, right after I met you for dinner, and then I had somebody who's doing the Course of Miracles read me their daily thing. And you and I had spoken about stuff that comes up for people around Course of Miracles, and is this religious? And, you know, because they're saying religious words, verbiage, right? And she starts reading it, and all those words are in there. And I'm like,
Totally.
and of course, I'm watching me go and really being just curious about it, like actually not being totally turned off, but there was the part of me that was really turned off. And I was so glad that we had that conversation. I was like, okay, so what is this all really saying if you take those words out? And now I'm just like forgetting what even she read to me, right?
Yeah.
But that's tricky. Like, I'm so interested in the Course of Miracles, but just having it feel so religious to me, and it's not. So, like, talk to me about that a little bit more.
Yeah, when I discovered it, I used to have that same thing. It's like, oh man, and growing up Catholic and then going to Baptist type churches, and like Christianity, there was a rebellion, and I was like, oh, I just, for me early on, we would go to church, and I just would ask questions that I didn't like any of their answers.
Right.
I'm like, I'm a kid, and I'm not buying that one.
Right.
So what you just said, I was, my parents said I should have always been a lawyer because I could find holes in their arguments. I'm like, nah, I don't buy that. I
don't think we're going to hell.
No, I'm like, I don't think so. And I'm like, I feel like I've experienced hell, at points in my life of darkness and all that. The Course uses those terms, but India taught me a lot, because when you go to India, Jesus is really revered there.
Oh.
Totally. There's pictures of him everywhere. It's crazy.
Wow.
I know people don't really know that.
And I've been to India. I guess I didn't notice.
You might not
when
notice
I was
it.
there.
Like I can remember being in India, we would go to like get massages or go, do like holistic type, like little healing kind of centers there. And I walked in one time, they had a picture of Jesus and A Course in Miracles underneath. I'm like, where am I? And translated in, I don't know if it was Hindi or what language where we were. They totally revere Jesus, but in a different way.
Yeah, like Thich Nhat Hanh does as well.
Totally. Yes. And a lot of the great masters and teachers did.
And so does Michael Singer. He's got a huge picture of Jesus and all of them.
Totally.
All the masters.
Well, if you understand the Course, it's actually, it would probably piss a lot of religious people off, because what he says in the Course, and it's a channeled material,
right? Really is Jesus channeled, right? Is that correct?
That's basically because Helen Schuckman was on the board director, one of the directors or board of psychology at Columbia, so they weren't these like in the backwoods Virginia, like I'm talking to Jesus. They were Freudian psychologists who didn't even believe in any of that stuff. Really, she was an agnostic, if you will. Thought of God, but like not really.
And this came through her.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know any of this.
Yeah,
so this is really
she
interesting
totally heard a voice one day and was freaked out.
Wow.
And she talked to her associate and was like, I heard a voice. And people don't really know this story, but she started having psychic dreams. And if you know Edgar Casey, who did a lot of like
Yes.
dream work, and his son Hewlin Casey, they were friends with, and they started talking about the psychic dreams that she was having that were coming true, things like that. And one day she heard a voice like, "This is a Course in Miracles. Take notes." And you know,
Oh, I just got chills
the
through my
thing,
whole body.
whether it's weird for it to be Jesus and that could piss a lot of people off, we could call it like the Christ mind, or the part of the
Yeah,
mind
Christ
of
consciousness.
Christ consciousness, or
Yeah.
even the awakened mind, like
Yep.
that speaks through the Holy Spirit, the inner guru. I mean, there's so many different ways of talking about it, but it's not religion, because
Right.
basically what it's saying is you yourself are the creation of God. And the book is very different than religion, because basically what it is,
It's you.
it's
not
you,
here.
and the book's it's like the Holy Spirit or the inner spirit talking to you.
Yes.
So it corrects a lot of misconceptions, even from religion, because the Course talks about all that stuff too. So when I discovered it, I started teaching it like really. When I say a teacher, I don't consider myself a teacher of Course in Miracles. I'm a student, and I
Right.
just shared for many,
Sure.
many years my
Sure.
experience, you know.
That's so cool. So I'm going to be doing a course this summer online. Just, like I go away for the summer and my students are like, "What do we do now?"
Yeah, yeah.
So I'm like, "Okay, let's just keep going." And so I figured I would do, I just invite them into this conversation that I am like, I just want people to talk to about all this stuff, right? So I'm picking different books and audios and things, and I am actually letting you know now I'm going to make it required reading.
That's cool.
The Urban Mystic. Maybe you can come on class one day.
That'd be great. That'd be
Yeah,
great.
I'm really excited. So, anyway, I don't know where I was going with this. Oh, I know. Just being the teacher, being the student, and just sharing in this dialogue. So that's what it's like. It's like you read this material and you just want to be a space for people to invite them into Sangha and have these questions and this discussion and dialogue, and whatever's coming through you is coming through you, and who knows what. But it's very cool. Different from like you teach the gratitude trainings.
Yeah.
It's a training that you've learned and you deliver. I
Totally.
teach, CIJ. It's a training that I've learned and I've delivered. And then this is a different space where you just get to be the student and the teacher and really just the facilitator, I think,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, totally. And that's how it came about. I didn't really want to start teaching. I got invited by a teacher who taught me A Course in Miracles, was going to India to be with his teacher. And it was the weirdest thing. He had somebody to teach his classes, and they had a falling out.
Right.
And when he called me, it was literally
That's
this.
so spiritual of them.
I know. It's so funny. I learned it from, he used to have falling outs with everybody. And I was like, is that really? That was a whole nother conversation. But I learned a lot from it. And when he called me, I literally knew before he even asked me. I was like, he's going to ask me to teach his class.
Wow.
I'm like, I already know. And I was just like, yep, I'll do it. And he was gone for like a month. So I would teach a class on meditation, like
Yep.
Eastern thought meditation,
Okay.
which I had been at that time, like already, 15 years I had read so many books and meditation, India and all that. And then I did a second class on A Course in Miracles for a month. And he got such great feedback. He's like, you should do your own class. And people were like, he doesn't even need to come back, just making a joke, you know?
Right.
And I started doing my own class, meditation, then A Course in Miracles. And then one night, I only had a couple people there, and they were like, can you combine both classes? And that's how my satsang, if you will, started. Because I used to use A Course in Miracles plus the teachings from the East, and I would just, whatever showed up. And
Nice.
then I did that every week for, it's been over 10 years, every week. And
So in the Course of Miracles, if I am correct, every day there's something to read and to practice,
Yeah.
right? And then, I know who it was. It was Krishna at Joe's house
yeah.
who read it to me. And
Yeah.
okay. And it was like she had to do her contract all day long, like tell herself how loving and awesome she was. And like I was getting annoyed at the way that it was written. It's like so funny, so crazy.
Yeah.
So weird, but I'm over it right now. I'm really, what's enrolling for me is who it got channeled through. That to me,
It's
I
interesting.
don't know why.
It's fascinating.
And
yeah.
you know my grandfather's story too. So my grandfather had
yeah.
it next to his chair at all times, and he was in AA, and he was my mother's perpetrator of incest. So I'm like,
Yeah.
to be in acceptance, forgiveness. That's another interesting conversation. Acceptance, forgiveness. But anyway, triggering book for me. but it just keeps coming up everywhere I am. So it's, all this invitation of this deeper wisdom for me is what I'm supposed to be doing. And
Yeah.
I'm like really excited about it. So you read one a day and you practice. And then when they come into your lesson or your thing, you're talking about that. Like, do you all start on the same one?
Well, it depends. With the trainer body at Gratitude,
Right.
the trainers in training, part of them, we want them to be really well versed, and I mean, it's the journey to being a trainer for Gratitude training is pretty intense,
Yes,
as you know.
I read it.
Yeah, it's
I
very.
was
I
like,
mean,
okay, I'm not ready for this
yeah,
yet.
and it was really a lot of what I did. So part of which was my vision, if you will, like I really wanted to bring the course to Gratitude, trainer body, the staff.
Yeah.
And so part of what they do is we do a call twice a month for 15 months. So I have them do the lessons, and then we go over each chapter.
Got it.
So we don't go over the lesson specifically because you're doing like 14 lessons in between each of the calls,
Got it.
But I make sure that they're doing them. I'll touch on the lessons or I'll touch on the text. For me, the lessons are very foundational for understanding the text. And the lessons are progressive. So, you could do the lessons every day, one a day. I mean, the first time I did it took me like 2 years to finish them.
Yeah.
Because it's like you're taught, there's a part of us that like, I don't want to hear this.
Yeah.
Because the course talks about it. I mean, you're really working with the ego. There's like two parts of our mind. There's one that is drawn to, if you would call it like the Holy Spirit or the inner guide.
Yeah.
There's a voice that speaks for love, wholeness, completeness, freedom, joy, abundance. And then there's another voice that speaks for fear, separation, anger, attack, conflict.
Right.
And most people cannot tell those voices apart.
Ah.
So what the course is really doing for 1,200 pages is really distinguishing it really clearly. So for me, I've never come across a teaching that describes the ego in such clarity.
Wow.
The way that it operates, because that's how I found it operating in my life.
Yeah.
So I think they need to do the lessons,
Yeah.
That's such an important part. And then we go over the manual for teachers, which is the third book in the back towards the end of the 15 months.
Oh, cool.
So we go through the whole book.
Yeah, that's neat.
Yeah.
I think for me, if I created new distinctions for words in there, like the way you said the Holy Spirit is really something, well, like it's not that, it's this or whatever, then that would work for me, I think. I would need like different distinctions for words.
It's recontextualizing the words because they're not used in the same context that we're used to them.
Yes. Like in religion or something.
Yeah, it's not like that. And for me, studying it brought such a depth to understanding religion on a deeper level too. And seeing where the dogma comes in, you could tell parts of religion that we as human beings brought in our own dogma to try to make God like us. And it's when you see that, it opened up my eyes like a whole new level, a whole new way.
Wow, neat.
Yeah.
So this book, how long did it take you to write it? What was your writing process as an author and as a writer? I think it's fascinating to know how this got born.
Thank you. Yeah. It's funny because on one level I could tell you how it came about, and then on another level I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah.
It came through. So how it came about was I wanted my first book to not be on A Course in Miracles, not be on like my teachers or the teachings I learned from. I wanted it to be through my words because I think for a lot of people they need that now.
Yeah.
A big part of like my goal is to save time for people. If I could take a lot of what I studied and condense it down, use my own words, that's how this came about. So basically what I would do is I would work with students.
Yep.
Whether it was in class, like satsang, or in the training, and they'd bring up like maybe an intense question and I'd go home and write about it. I'm like, let me write a page or two on this so I could get it out there. And then they became like memoirs, really.
Right.
I was writing them on all these things like the body, love and fear, the dreamer of the dream. There's some like political things in terms of people came to me when the riots in Baltimore happened. Like, can you write something on it? So I just write something on it. Or
Right.
the shooting in the Orlando nightclub.
Yep.
I would write something on it. And not from a political perspective, but from a spiritual perspective of,
Yeah.
of
How do we transcend this?
yeah, how do we
Like,
transcend this? Like, as human beings, why is this showing up in
Yeah.
our consciousness, you
Yeah.
know? So, and then I had some of my own stories a little bit in there,
Yeah.
you know, at the ending, beginnings, endings, and in between. That's one of the chapters. Like, my nephew, my brother's son was born, my father passed, like, all this stuff was happening. And I'm like, I'm just going to write something on it, you know?
Yes.
And that's how the book came about. It was probably like 35 memoirs, and then I just started compiling them. And I had a great couple called the Book Couple. They were recommended to me by I think you might know Kim Weiss. She works for publishing, and she said reach out to this couple, and they were great. They were
Nice.
like edited it. They got what I was saying. She kept it in my words, and
Great.
then before you know it was like a book. Yeah. So, but
When
I'd say
did it actually come out, like
it-
officially?
like I think we launched it 2 weeks ago.
oh my God.
Yeah, it's
It's
just very
born. It's this
totally,
little baby
totally.
borners.
Yeah, and I think it took me like 4.5 years, maybe 4 years of just
I
memoirs.
love that. 4.5 years, because I wrote Directing Your Destiny in 4.5 months. So I thought you were going to say that.
No,
I'm like,
you're
oh,
way
me
better
too."
than me.
No, well, no, because my new book is taking so long, and it's a different.
Yeah,
So who I was then and who I am now is completely
Totally.
changed. But my book, very quickly, because who cares, whatever. But just as a writing process, right? I was so frustrated when I saw the movie The Secret. And I was being so frustrated from everything I was reading that it was like a slippery fish. And I was like, where's the manual? Like, how do you, I understand this law of attraction. I understand all this work, but like, how do you make it happen in your life? Like, what is the how to? So, Directing Your Destiny is actually like a how to manifest and how to create your reality. And I just kind of framed it inside of the acting world and film world because that's what I came from. And I literally just got up every morning from 5:30 to 6:30 a.m. and I wrote for 1 hour. And it took me 4.5 months to get 50,000 words, and it was a really shitty first draft. But that's how I just got it out.
That's
just like an
awesome.
hour a day, just banged it out.
That's
you know?
awesome.
But now this book, my next book, Drop the Rope, which is, more in this whole world. And it's really funny. It's like the opposite. I'm like, well, maybe don't direct your destiny. Maybe, be open, a lot more open, and that driving and striving and like, I gotta that and I want this. And now I'm just like, well, let's see what shows up. It's like such a different energy. So as life happens, I write about it. And so that's why this book
awesome.
has just been over the last few years, and it's still not done. It's like my next pieces are coming to me for me to articulate more. I feel as if this book is an articulation, again, a clarity for people of what I'm comprehending that maybe if they read some other books, it would be hard. So yours is that for me as well. Like it's a
Awesome.
really clear understanding of all of it, and I guess there's this core work, and I'm curious to know the trainings and, Michael Singer's work and all this work. Is it all coming from this one kind of core truth? It's like, that's the word that comes up to me. Like, what is the truth? And this feels like that is a conversation, and I can understand your depiction of the truth.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. It's for me and my background, it's very interesting because what you just said, directing your destiny and dropping the rope, is the crux of a spiritual question that when you're gonna find anyone who goes deep enough is gonna find themselves on the crux of this, and the crux of this is. Am I directing my destiny? Is it
Yes.
free will, or is God or the creator that I'm surrendering to divine will?
Yes.
And where is the distinction, and
Yes.
are they the same? And because you've got all these law of attraction books, I used to rebel against them in the
Yes.
beginning. Like even I can remember early in my 20s, somebody gave me a book, Think and Grow Rich.
Right.
And I was like, nah,
Right.
because you're trying to direct your own destiny.
Yes.
And then that leaves out what's already destined. Like, so there's this
Yes.
crux of, do I direct my destiny? Do I
Yeah.
use my thoughts and
Yes.
manifest, or do I surrender and
Yeah, and do
allow and do nothing?
Yeah. And this was a huge conversation
Oh,
for
yeah.
my students and I. We go up to see Michael Singer a few weeks ago, and he and I always banter back and forth about this, and I get it. Like, I'm in the middle now. Like, I haven't given up setting goals and intentions and having visions, but it's so loose for me. Like, people are saying, what are you going out to LA for? So the old Jen would be like, I'm going out to LA to have this, this, and this happen. And now who I am today, it's like I'm going out to create connection.
Yeah.
Not connections, but just to create connection.
Yeah.
And I don't know what that's going to look like, and I have no agenda. But I am going there. And I have a wish to, so this is me in my glory, right? Like, eventually I just want to have more of this, more media meeting transformation. So that's an intention, but I am not attached to what that looks like. Is it a TV show? Is it this? But I know that there are people out there that maybe something, right? So there's no expectation or attachment, but yet there's this goal.
Yeah.
So it's like, and so I say to Michael, well, what the heck do I intend? What are my goals? And he's like, just manifest everything. I'm like, ah.
Yeah.
So what do you think?
I could sit and talk about this for a long time, because
That's why we're going to go to lunch with Health.
Yes,
we
that
can
would
talk
be
about
great.
this for a
I would-
time.
I would love
a
it.
5-hour lunch.
I believe it's both.
Okay,
I've
good.
asked
Me too.
I've asked people this.
Okay.
So, and I'll just leave you with it. It might sound like a riddle or a koan, is people used to say, am I directing my destiny, or is God directing my destiny? The first thing, even to answer that question, you'd have to be able to show me where God stops and you start. Because it assumes that there's like me and then there's God. So which is it?
Right.
But one of the things in India that you'll hear them talk about a lot is that there's no doer. Buddha said this. He said, events happen, deeds are done, there's no individual doer thereof. So there isn't like an individual Jen in there.
Right.
That we try to, like, if I do this, then that'll happen.
Right.
Wait, maybe let me be really, I'll even be in a good way, so when the producers see me, maybe that'll create.
Right. Yes.
So there's this individual in there trying to strategically plan and have life happen a certain way.
Yes.
Then on the other end, there's this like, I just surrender to God's will.
Yeah.
And I think it could be both.
Yeah.
You said something about like letting go of the attachment. I think Deepak Chopra talked about it in his book, 7 Spiritual Laws of Success. They read that in gratitude.
Sure.
Like shooting the arrow of your intention out there, but you letting go of the arrow.
Sure.
Not holding on.
Yes.
So I think, and I write about this in the book, because for me it's bridged. It's like, the Course says this a lot too, is that, I follow in the way appointed to me, or I place the future in the hands of God. So, and yet every day I have a choice between love or fear. I have a choice between, am I in the zone? I talk about this, or am I like, when you're in the zone, it's like, it's just
in your flow.
You're in your flow. You don't have to like, is this working?
Yes.
You're in it. But when you're not in your flow, it's like, so those states are two totally distinct and really diametrically opposed, as the Course would say, thought systems.
Yes.
So I'm open to choosing which one or the other, and I always choose one at the expense of the other. So if I choose peace, the zone, I let go of doubt and all that stuff.
Right,
I let it go, because
Yep.
I'm like, this is where I'm operating from.
Totally.
So as human beings, I believe we have the choice. We totally have choice. So we could say in our free will, if you will, I could choose one or the other.
Yep.
And which one I choose is going to direct results and my destiny. And yet, on another level, I would say we're on a journey that's already over. We're on a journey back to where we've always been.
Yeah.
And you can't really mess it up. You could delay.
Sure.
So
like the part of like the movie, like this is just a playback, like Gary Renauld in Disappearance of the Universe, he's like, this is just a playback. And that really served me when I was going through really tough times. I'm like, it's just a movie. It's just a movie. And even listening to that guy Amir and all this, the lucid dreaming, like, you even talk about it in your book, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, what's the difference between, you're in a dream and you're chasing the lion, but you've created or the lion's chasing you. And what's to say that when you wake up, you're not still dreaming?
Totally.
We are dreaming.
It's a dream. So now in the dream, as choice and free will, I could recognize that I'm the one dreaming the dream.
Yep.
And that the dream's not happening to me.
Right.
And when I switch that, then what starts to happen is there's an allowance, a surrendering.
Mm-hmm.
And then I start to realize that I dreamt up a dream. And even the ability to dream up a dream comes from the fact that I'm alive and conscious.
Yes.
So my conscious connected presence, that awareness,
Yep.
that I could even conjure up a dream. That could be a nightmare, or even like the Course says, a happy dream.
Sure.
So which is it going to be?
You
Both of them are
choose.
dreaming.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in terms of waking up from the dream altogether, that's even beyond, I think, as human beings, what we can really, with our minds, grasp.
Which is enlightenment, right?
Yeah.
Like really waking up from the dream and being in that state all the time. Like for me, I am in the dream and then I remember that I'm dreaming, especially if I'm in it with something and I'm grappling, and then it's like, nope. And it's this just falling back into the seat of awareness again and again. But I think the great masters or the enlightened ones are always in the seat of awareness,
They are. It's interesting for me because I had a journey in discovering this, because early on, one of the things I don't really talk about in the book, but a lot of people don't know, is I read a book that really impacted me deeply called Stripping the Gurus. And somebody wrote a book on like the side of the gurus that a lot of people didn't see.
Right.
And they weren't pretty pictures, some of them. So when I discovered A Course in Miracles, I started to think, and what the Course talked about this, is that as human beings, while we're still playing with this meat suit, if you will, or this like...
Yeah, the house we're living in.
Yeah, we're prone to forgetting. The Course says, if you're walking on the planet, you're still prone to forgetting, like the temptation of forgetting. I think the masters, like that book I was telling you about, I Am That, they asked Maharaj, do you still have stuff come up for you? He said something along these lines. It's not exact, but it's close. He said, as long as one is still burdened with the personalities and the idiosyncrasies that come with it, they're still subject to forgetting. So he would say it still comes up for him, but at once it's real, it's discarded as like, that's not me.
Yes,
So
immediately.
there's like, that's not me. So even if there is that come up, that's what the Course calls a miracle, is the shifting. So I softened a lot over the years in thinking like enlightenment is this thing that I remember when I went to India the first time, they had this thing up. They said enlightenment is like the recognition of like beyond the individual, if you will, something like that.
Yeah.
And they said something like, don't expect any bright lights to go off in your head when it happens. Like we think it's going to be this like endless orgasm or something, like, we just float
because
off.
People have also told us that.
They've told us that.
Had that experience.
Totally. And then what I find happens is, because this happened to me, I when I was in my early 20s, I was obsessed with, what if I don't get enlightened in this life? Like I treated enlightenment like it was like getting $1 million or something, or like hitting the game-winning shot.
Right.
Because that's how I approached it.
Uh-huh.
And then it started to be like, nah, like I started to just relax into that I'm a human, and I forget sometimes.
Yes.
And
So I want to share with you, when I was the first time I went up to Michael Singer, I was in a farmhouse and I went upstairs for a nap, and I was alone, and it was like the 4 or 5 o'clock when the lights playing, and it was just so peaceful in this farmhouse. And I looked around the room, and suddenly it just came to me. I was like, I could choose this. And I thought, oh, that could be my next book. It would be very short, and it would say, I am enlightened. Next page, so are you. Next page, we both just forgot. The end.
That's great.
And it was so funny. I declared, or I chose in that moment, that I was like, you actually could just choose that. Choose awareness. Choose to just be. That's what enlightenment looks like to me, is my capacity to drop the rope and be in awareness, right? And I do that again and again all day long. And who's to say that enlightenment is this big booming voice that you hear from God, or the blissed out 20 weeks in a row, or you hear Byron Katie and Eckhart Tolle, and even Michael Singer speaks about this, right? And who's to say that you can't just choose it?
Totally. I like this distinction from A Course in Miracles because this was also a game changer in terms of distinctions for me. The Course used to say that revelation directly unites you with God. Miracles directly unite you with your brothers and sisters. So
Okay.
miracles induce action where revelation induces awe. Like,
So give me new words for revelation,
yeah, like
right?
revelation would be that moment when it's so unspeakable.
you
like,
got it.
like, oh, like
Okay,
the universe
okay.
opens up to you.
Yes.
Well, the Course says that's actually not as important right now for us. It's like if it comes, it comes. What's more important is practicing day in and day out to shift our minds, using forgiveness. When I say forgiveness, not like I forgive you, but I give forth, I shift my mind and recognize myself that I'm dreaming. I'm the dreamer of the dream.
Right, and that there's nothing to forget.
There's
even.
nothing to forgive. I forgive myself for either conjuring up a nightmare out of my
Right.
dream.
Got it.
And then I made all these characters in my dreams like they're trying to rob my peace. And the nightmare's like, you got to watch out. And
Right.
oh my God, what if they steal this, my little piece from me? Like I wouldn't. And what happens when we have the miracle, it's like all those characters in the dream that were like, we were afraid of, the fear, it shifts into a happy dream where everything's an opportunity to extend love and bless and heal. That shifting in our minds, we can do day in, day out.
Yeah,
The gas
all day
station,
long.
here, wherever. Revelation,
You know what's so funny about that word? I know what revelation means, but then the second I go revelation, do they talk about that in religion when they say
I think,
revelation?
yes, they do. Like revelation is in the Bible, like revelations.
Yes, right.
As
So
totally.
when you said the word revelation, I couldn't even go to the real dictionary word of like to reveal to, I had a revelation. Like I know that word. And I said to you, what does that mean? Because it just went right to the Bible. And I was like, I hate that word. It's like,
Yeah.
God, hate, that's a strong word. Wow, look what comes
It's
up.
no,
This
it's
is so
totally,
funny. Like,
totally
I don't get like
no,
this ever.
No, it's good. It's good. It's just you're recontextualizing some of these words. So revelation would be that like awestruck moment.
Yes, of
where
course.
how do you
Got
even
it.
describe it, right?
Yeah.
Well, the funny thing that the Course says is that awe should only be reserved for God. It's not an appropriate response among brothers and sisters and equals.
Oh.
Which in India, like the guru game and all that, I was like,
In
they're
awe.
more special than I am. They're
Right.
better than I am.
Right.
You know, Ram Dass said this. He's like, you'd rather be some schnook sitting in front of a great man than to actually recognize you're also the light.
Right.
And this is what I used as a way to gauge how good a teacher was, because if they said you're the same, then I was like, I trust them. If they said something like, I have something you don't, and if you just do what I'm telling you, eventually, if you're lucky, you'll get it.
Right.
That's when all the hierarchy gets created, and that's where all the,
Yeah, that's the stripped gurus.
yeah.
What time is it right here? Hold on. Wow, we are like 6 minutes.
Wait,
I wanna
6
do-
minutes left?
Yes. See, this is why the Hilf lunch is gonna.
Yeah, oh my gosh,
First
well-
of all, what up, Michael Hilf? Thank you for reminding me to make sure to have Chris on the show. Of course.
Thank you, Michael.
Yay. And so do we have time to read a little something or no?
Well,
We're just
what
gonna
we
have
spoke.
to get it.
Well, we could read the Dreamer of the Dream. We spoke about
Yeah.
it. So why don't I read that
Let's
one?
do that.
Since
Find
we
it.
yeah,
You
it's
know where it
right.
is.
Yeah, good lord, I
You
might
better
still
know.
have to look it up. Here it is.
So we're gonna read a little
And
excerpt.
this is from page 81. If you have the
Okay.
book.
If you have the book, read along. Get your copy out. That should be right next to you at all
So
times.
this came from a student was working with me, and they were like, I feel like I notice my life in two different ways, like we were talking about. So I'll read it. It said, someone told me today that he noticed that it's as if he's coming from two different places in his life. When he spoke about his experience, he was comparing his life to a dream. And most of us have heard the analogy that, quote, life is a dream. What he noticed was that there seemed to be two aspects of dreaming. One aspect was like lucid dreaming, so he knew he was dreaming. He could sense and see things before they happened in a space where he himself was authoring the dream. You ever have that? It's like
Oh, yeah,
in your
like
life.
I'm doing this.
Like I know. It's like I was just sharing you. Like I pulled into the parking lot. I didn't even know where I was going. It was like,
Right.
He was calling forth everything in that space to himself as the dreamer of the dream. The other aspect was when he noticed that he was having, quote, a bad day or things weren't going right. At those times, he said, it was as if another force was doing what it wanted in the dream and he was at the mercy of it. So those are two totally different come-froms, which is also a little bit about what we were talking about earlier. The very nature of what it means to dream is that a dream is illusory. Now, it's obvious that when you dream of being in danger, you most likely wake up in a pool of sweat with your heart racing. That doesn't mean you didn't dream up the danger you believe was there. Even though you forgot you dreamed it up and treated it as real, does not make it reality. We could say the same thing about our lives. So we're saying just because you dream it up does not make it reality, even though it feels real to us. Just because it feels real does not give it reality.
Right.
There are only two places to come from while dreaming. One of them is that you're the dreamer of the dream, and the other is that you're at the mercy of the dream. They bring opposite experiences of dreaming. Keep in mind that both are still dreams, and before we talk about what is beyond dreaming, I believe it's important to first understand that we are dreaming. Mm-hmm. We can either have a nightmare, or as A Course in Miracles calls it, a happy dream. What is beyond dreaming cannot be understood in dream language or perception. It can only be pointed at, and we could use symbols to speak about it, but ultimately is beyond anything we can understand while dreaming. So it's beyond our dream perception and thought thinking, you know? We could see this in our own experience. When I'm robbed in my dream, it would make no sense to call the police when I wake up. In fact, the dream is no longer recorded reality when I wake up. What if it is the same with our lives? If that were the case, I'm only concerned with recognizing that I am dreaming and turning it into a happy dream. Now, having a happy dream isn't necessarily about getting the dream the way that I want it to be, but rather about seeing that I am dreaming and realizing that nothing in the dream can ultimately hurt me. I must recognize that I made it all up. It's only when we forget that we're dreaming that the dream seems to be a force outside us that threatens our sense of freedom and peace. When we remember that we are dreaming, it's like the dream becomes a beautiful dance. We play with dream figures for a little while, realizing deep down that ultimately they can't touch us. In the end, we can let the final step of going beyond the dream rest in the hands of the one who is beyond time, space, and dreaming. When the moment that is beyond time occurs, you will see for yourself that you are and have always been the one who is ultimately beyond any dream.
Drop the mic. Boom. Wow.
And what I was alluding to is that God takes that final step, ultimately beyond dreaming. We don't need to concern ourselves with that right now.
No.
You're driving home. We're driving to Miami. We're living.
Yeah, we're
so
here.
How about we recognize that we're dreaming first?
Yep.
And shift it from a nightmare into a happy dream, and then when the moment. In India, they call it like moksha, liberation, maha samadhi, where you transcend all of this.
Yeah.
We'll leave that moment for when it occurs.
Okay. Awesome. Sounds like a plan.
Yeah.
So where can they get this book?
Amazon.
Awesome.
Go to Amazon. And,
Urban Mystic, Christopher DeSanti.
Type in Christopher DeSanti. That's DeSanti. Christopher, ChristopherPher.
And your website also?
ChristopherDeSanti.com.
Very easy. I love that. And do you also work with people outside of the gratitude trainings as well, or not so much?
People reach out to me a lot.
Yeah.
You know, I'm thinking of, as time goes on, maybe just doing something once or twice a month just to have everyone have access to it.
Got it.
My schedule is quite full, and I don't really take on new stuff as much. And
but you can work with Chris in the gratitude trainings, which I've done, and they're mind-blowing. So,
awesome. Gratitudetraining.com.
That's right. Yeah. Awesome. What's up, Joe?
What's up, Joe?
Say hi to Lori, your beautiful, awesome wife.
I love you, my wife, Lori. Yeah.
I love you, Sev.
All right. All of you.
So I think that's the show, yo.
All right, yo.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
This is amazing.
Awesome. Thank you for having me.
Yes,
I really enjoyed it.
Absolutely. Yay, the Urban Mystic.
Enjoy. Get it now. Amazon.
Check it out.